Every single one of your customers needs to know why you exist. And until they do not care about what you actually do. Everybody, welcome back to Marketing with Stories, episode 4. Every single week on Marketing with Stories, we teach you different ways that you can market authentically, that you can market your business through storytelling. And this week, I want to talk about what you do, but I more importantly want to talk about why you do it, because I believe that why you do what you do is actually one of the most important things that you can communicate. And it's so important to understand when telling your story or when you're talking about your products. Now, don't get me wrong, what you do is important. The quality of what you do, the consistency of your product, how fast you can deliver something, all of those things are absolutely essential to growing a business. But research is starting to show, and has been for the last decade or so, that people want to know why you do what you do. And so I want to ask you, could you answer the question, why do you do what you do, in a sentence or two? Would that be an easy conversation to have, or would you kind of have to rack your brain and come up with some vague sentence that makes you look like a good person? You might have the answer, and I hope that you do. And I would also encourage you, let's ask your employees. Like, do your employees know why you do what you do? And do your customers? Your customers should be able to describe why you do what you do. And if your customers can't describe why you do what you do, then there's probably been a disconnect in messaging. It might be that you've never even tried to communicate why you do what you do to them. But every one of your customers ideally should be able to describe why you do what you do. Now, I know that there's some kind of more old school businesses that they're used to doing things before this thing called the internet exists, and they kind of liked keeping their reasons behind business more secret. That was kind of more private information. And back in the olden days, you sold a product and people bought it if that was kind of the first product that they saw, or the product at the top of the white pages or the top of the magazine or whatnot. And things are just different now. People actually want to know why you're doing what you do. And so I know that most episodes we're talking about like practicals like email marketing or Facebook or different things like that. But with this foundational thing of, if you don't understand why you do what you're doing, then people really won't care about what you do. A few years ago, Simon Sinek kind of popularized this concept with his book, Start With Why, which is right over there. And it's a great book. It's a really, really good book. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. But in that book, he talks about how there's these intrinsic motivators that people have behind supporting businesses and behind supporting the people that we support. And in your journey as a business, there's going to be people that come along that have a comparable product. There's going to be people in your city that open up that, maybe they see that what you're doing is great and making money, and they decide to open up the same thing. But they can't duplicate why you do what you do. They can't duplicate your story. And so that is what I want you to be thinking about this week, is clarify your why. Make a video. Grab your phone and make a video and go online and share it with your audience that describes, hey, I don't know if I've ever just told you why we do what we do. We love serving you as customers, but here's why we do it. And I think that you're going to see it. People want to know that. People are excited to hear that there's a purpose behind you serving them with products and stuff. So take that this week, make a video talking about why you do what you do, and we'll see you next week on Marketing with Stories. This week in marketing, we're talking about another podcast. I've been kind of consumed in the podcast world recently, so I'm seeing a lot of really good examples of it. And I heard the finish to a beautiful story through a podcast this week that I thought was great. The podcast is called The Startup. A lot of you might know it's by Gimlet Media, and Gimlet is a podcasting company that was recently acquired by Spotify. And I remember starting to follow Gimlet, I want to say it was 4 years ago, when they started the company. Alex Bloomberg left This American Life, started this podcasting company, and their first podcast they launched was The Startup. And the first season, maybe 2 seasons, was documenting them trying to build a company. and them trying to find venture capital investors. And so every single week you were actually learning about what was going on in the company, and it was just such a good story. So then fast forward 4 years, and the startup has told a lot of stories of other businesses and whatnot, but I think it was last March or February that Spotify acquired Gimlet Media. So they just published the final season of the startup, and in that final season they talk about the process of getting acquired, and they produce several episodes that's kind of like the closing of this story. And so it's just really amazing, because you can go back to the beginning and you can hear them talking on episodes about how they want to build this podcasting empire that one day gets acquired by a big company, and then a few years later you actually see them do it. And I just think it's such a good example of it's actually marketing. Like, it's building a relationship between us and the company, but it's an amazing example of storytelling. So if you haven't listened to the Startup podcast, I encourage you to for sure listen to the first season and the last season, but go and check it out, because we don't often see these stories come full circle. We often hear people talking about what they want to accomplish, but most people don't continue telling that story until they actually reach the goal. So it's just such a good example. Go check it out. We'll see you next week.